Hello, it's Trout, and today I'm bringing you guys my Stamina Templar build video, Karl Franz. Let's go ahead and dive into the gear. We're using 2-piece Selines, 5-piece Ravager, and 5-piece Bone Pirate Tatters. We're using 3 tri-stat glyphs, 1 on the head, chest, and legs. And we're using, don't mind the thunderstorm outside, it's like Vietnam out there right now. And we're using 4 max stamina glyphs on the small pieces. All 7 pieces of armor are impenetrable. We are using dual wield, 2 maces, and we're using Bone Pirate jewelry because it comes in robust. We are an Imperial. It's going to give us more max health, give us 10% stamina, 12% max health, and a cool little passive that heals the shit out of you on a Stamplar. Red Diamond. This passive is strong as hell on a Stamplar. Your melee attacks have a 10% chance to restore 6% of your max health. This build in Cyrodiil winds up having, I think, like 30 health shy of 28k health, which is a shit ton. with this much damage potential. So that's going to be a nice heal. I think we wind up getting more healing with biting jabs. Obviously we're Stamplar, so we're using biting jabs. Than a Magplar would using puncturing sweeps. It's pretty nice. And it heals you about, in theory, over like 15 to 1600 when it procs. And it usually procs at least once per jabs, but usually 2-3 times. It's usually 2 times, but up to 3, sometimes 4 if you're real lucky. Shit heals you right up. And it's like almost like a non-crit Vigor tip. Very nice heal over time. A lot of people underestimate that passive. It's useless on anything but a Stamplar, though, in my opinion. Anyway, back into the gear. So we're using 5 heavy. We're using a heavy Selene set. We're using a heavy chest, heavy legs, and heavy boots. Taking advantage of as many resistances as we can possibly take advantage of. Using a medium bone pirate gloves and a medium belt. We cannot run 511 on this build for the extra undaunted resources. Simply because we're using an Asylum 2-hander on the back bar. We're using 1 weapon damage glyph, 1 cost reduction glyph, and 1 stamina recovery glyph on our jewelry. All of our jewelry is robust. It's going to up our stamina pool, up our damage. And on our maces, our offhand is infused with the Berserker. Don't worry, it's going to proc a lot. As long as you're weaving, that's going to be up pretty much all the time. And that infuse buffs our main hand, Crusher, the cooldown, which, wow, I should really repair that Crusher. It's like 1 hit and it's done. And our main hand mace is going to be Nirnhand. Stamplar doesn't have too strong penetration. They don't have a major penetration debuff like a Stam Warden or a Stam DK. So, or even a Stam Nightblade, they get it on there, spammable. So we got to use maces. We do, however, get the minor penetration buff from Power of the Light. And then on our back bar, we're using a Asylum 2-hander with a Disease enchant. Mine just sharpened. The best trait for this back bar 2-hander is going to be Nirnhand to up our rally. But you gotta have, in my opinion, the best enchantment for this 2-hander on the back bar is Disease. It's going to proc when you're coming down with your Execute, Reverse Slice, and provide quite a significant amount of bonus damage. When you're trying to execute somebody, you need that little extra burst. And it provides that for you. And then if it procs Major Defile, that's when you need it most. Your enemy's trying to heal their asses up when you're executing them. Or should be anyway. And if they're not healing their asses up, they're dead. And that's going to provide an extra burst. And you get that Major Defile to proc off of it, which I believe is a 40% chance. But it may be a 20%. I cannot remember off the top of my head. It's going to make it much harder for them to out-heal your execute. And you're going to wind up crushing them. And that ultimate regen from this Asylum 2-hander is ridiculous. So we're going to go into the skills. Also, this Asylum 2-hander, we're going to use we use Crescent Sweep on our back bar. This Asylum 2-hander, if you got like a DK spamming Quag Blood, this Asylum 2-hander mixed with Crescent Sweep is what gives you the power to knock them into next week and finish them. So let's go ahead and dive into the skills. On our front bar, we're running Repentance. Get that 10% extra recoveries, which lets us not rely on being a red guard for our sustain. So we are an Imperial, we don't get any bonus to our recoveries natively. And anytime we kill somebody, we get a nice small amount of stamina and health back. It's not small, I'd say a decent amount. It's just a nice skill, it's free to cast, and it's real nice if you're small grouping. Sometimes when you're solo, it's not worth it, because it doesn't aid you on achieving a kill. All you get is the 10% recoveries, which is nice, but it doesn't do much in aiding you, finish the job on your target. We're using Power of the Light. This is your burst tool. Skill copies 20% of the damage. It does a decent amount of damage when you apply it too. Copies 20% of the damage for 6 seconds, and releases it back onto the target. This scales with your max stamina too, and it applies the Minor Fracture and Minor Breach debuffs to your opponent, helping your small man too with the Minor Breach and Minor Fracture, because everybody can benefit from the penetration debuffs on your opponent. And it's going to help buff our penetration, which is very low on a Stamplar, because we don't have a Major Fracture debuff in our toolkit. Using Biting Jabs, that's our spammable bread and butter, baby. It's melee damage. Burning Light counts as melee damage. It's a 70% movement snare. It gives us our major savagery. It's an AoE. It's a great skill when it actually hits the fucking target. All you Templars know, it's kind of a pain in the ass once you get on Cyrodiil, or in Cyrodiil during prime time. Sometimes it likes to bug out. I find the best way to use it and make it land is you backpedal, kind of like what people do with Dizzying Swing, from the target. And this are obviously running from you, but if they're just standing there, or like slowly moving around, because they're going to be snared to hell and back, I find it's best to backpedal a little bit while using the skill. Move on to our CC. Binding Javelin, our class CC. It's decent. It's expensive as fuck. 2980 stamina. I'm not a huge fan of the cost, but it's a reliable CC. So, gets the job done. It's not a hard CC, so I really shouldn't say it's reliable. But it does pretty good damage, especially when it procs Burning Light. But other than that, it's just a knockback kind of CC. The enemy's got to usually travel through the animation. We all know how knockback works. It's better than just a stun in my personal opinion. We're going to move on to our main snare, Rending Slashes. This is a dot. It's very cheap for what it does. 1500 stamina. Shitty 5-meter range, so you got to be up on their fucking grill for it to hit them. Kind of like Mag DKs and their Burning Embers. You got to be on them. Once I apply it, I usually tend to backpedal a little bit so I can land the jabs. But this is just our strong dot. It's a bleed. Ignores all the resistances. Once again, bypassing our lack of penetration. And it's a nice 50% movement speed snare, so you can land your jabs. And that snare stacks multiplicatively with the snare from biting jabs. So your enemies wind up getting locked down. Now you can run Blood Craze. It's a nice heal over time. I wouldn't say too nice. It's like another rally, pretty much, a little bit stronger. But since we're using Selines, I find when we use Blood Craze that the Selines does not hit. And you'd be more inclined to use a set like Bloodspawn. Now we're going to move on to our ultimate, Dawnbreaker is Smiting. You know it, you love it. It's only 120 ult for us because we're a Templar. We get that 4% cost reduction on all of our skills, which is... it's there. It's not too strong of a passive, but it's there. And great ultimate. That's your Stam go-to. Every Magic Attune wishes they had it. Let's get on to our back bar. We're using Rally. That's our heal. It's a nice little heal over time. And most importantly, that's our Major Brutality. Keep that shit up 100% of the time. We're using Resolving Vigor as our second slot. You're going to want to keep this up as much as possible. We have a very high health pool on this build, just 28k when we're in Cyrodiil. So you can be a little forgiving with not having it up, but keep this shit up as much as you can. No reason not to. As long as you keep this up, you're living. 3k stamina though, so it's a little on the expensive side. That's why we got a heavy attack weave with our jabs. I'll get into that a little later. Third skill is Reverse Slice. This is our Execute. Much better than Execution in my opinion for 1vx and small man because the other enemies nearby take 79% of the damage inflicted to the primary target. And if you hit somebody with this at 1%, the people beside them are losing about 40% of their health. It's fucking hilarious. And even if they're blocking, it goes through block. The splash damage goes through block. And it's pretty entertaining when that happens. It's also fun when you get like 2 or 3 people in one Reverse Slice. It's fucking hilarious. Very good execute, very cheap for what it does too. Our fourth ability in our back bar is Extended Ritual. It's a little heal over time that scales a magic skill. We don't give two shits about that. We're stamina. But we're using it for the Purge. It's a 5 harmful effects that are being removed from ourselves. This is your snare removal. This is why we're running high key glyphs. And it's phenomenal skill. If you're a Templar not running this, you're nuts. It's expensive though in the magic pool, but with Constitution and our Haikija glyphs, I find that we can rely on it when we need it to remove the snares from us. And our fifth skill is our armor buff, our minor protection, and our minor vitality buff. Restoring focus. Relatively cheap for what it does, but sometimes it's sometimes you want to get out of your house on a Stamplar. You're moving around, your stamina. That's how stamina works. And sometimes it's kind of hard to remember to weave back through your restoring focus to maintain your buffs. For this skill, this pretty much lets us run dual wield instead of sword and board. It makes us survivable, reducing our damage taken by 8%, increasing our healing received by 8%, and our resistance buffs. Strong skill. It's cheap for it's cheap, but once again, it has a skill level to use it. And then our ultimate on our back bar is Crescent Sweep. I love this ultimate. So what I like to do, if I'm fighting like a tanky person, or simply don't have enough ultimate for a Dawnbreaker, if I'm fighting like a tanky person and they're spamming Quag Blood or Shrooms if they're a Warden, and you're ripping them with Reverse Slice with our Asylum weapon, we're getting a lot of ultimate back. So we can combo a Crescent Sweep while we're executing with Reverse Slice, and that's almost always enough to knock somebody out. Very good skill. Make sure you keep your enemy in the frontal cone. It takes 66% more damage from this ability, and it hits hard as hell. And it's very, very, very cheap. It's almost like an AoE end cap with none of the cool shit that end cap has. It also has a weak-ass dot connected to it, but the dot can also proc Burning Light. And when the initial hit of the skill procs Burning Light, it's a very, very nice burst. It's only 72 ultimate too, and that's going to give us our Ajax Spear passives on our back bar, which these passives are pretty strong. They give you 10% more critical damage and increase your damage done against blocking targets by 10%. Very strong to have on your back bar, especially when you're trying to execute somebody. People are usually blocking, trying to reduce all the damage they can from that they're receiving. Gives a spear wall. We got a block on our two-hander bars. So if there's a Nightblade that ambushes us, you automatically block, so you know they're gonna rip you up with that fucking end cap. Reduces that end cap damage taken by 15%. While we're blocking, obviously, on top of that. Because we're not running sword and board, so we gotta try to reduce that damage that we receive as much as we can when we do block, which is very expensive for us. But I find that you have to block when you need to in this game. You cannot just let an end cap rip you in half. It'll tear you a new asshole for 7 or 8k. But when it procs Burning Light, it's a nice, very nice burst on top of it. It doesn't seem like much here, but when it crits, it's usually another 3-4k damage. And it's a very nice skill. But we are using Dubious Camoran Throne as our food/drink buff. It's a drink, procs Bonfire Tatters. I'm just used to calling it food because, most people refer to it as your food buff. That grants us stamina recovery, max stamina, and max health, which we love that max stamina, max health because we're an Imperial. And our potions that we're using is Immovable, Major Expedition, and Stamina. These let you be mobile, these let you line of sight, and give you your major stamina recovery, give you a nice burst stam, and they got nerfed. All the immovabilities got nerfed this patch. That's Zos's way of countering permablock. Just don't use these right after you break free unless you truly need the stamina return. I also carry some major vitality, lingering health potions on me. These are if I'm getting fucking wailed on in a tower. Yeah, there goes fucking thunder outside. That's storming in game too. But he's gonna give us survivability when we need it the most. Just make sure you heavy attack when you have these up, because you're missing your 20% from major endurance from the other potion. Missing that 20% stam recovery, and makes it much harder to sustain. But these will keep your ass alive, as long as you play properly with it and keep your vigor up. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our champion points. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Start with the green tree, the tower. We're using 61 Warlord, 14 Sprinter. We're not using a gap closer, so we got to sprinter ass to our target sometimes. It's all right. You barely got to do that. Once you snare them up, they're usually not moving anywhere. We're using 56 in tenacity. We heavy weave with biting jabs, as I'll show you in a few minutes. And 75 Mooncalf to up our stamina recovery. We're not a red guard. We need as much resource to stay in as possible. And that's going to help us out quite a lot. And we're using 34 Tumbling. No matter what, you're going to have to roll dodge in this game. It happens. It's something that you have to put points into, in my opinion, in Cyrodiil. You have to roll dodge. I don't care if you're a tanky mag DK or a Magplar healer. You're going to be roll dodging eventually. Always have points in the Tumbling. And that 34 is, I think it's plenty for me. So I heavy attack with my jabs, and that helps me save quite a bit of stamina when I'm trying to play defensively. Let's move on to the blue tree. 43 blessed. This almost makes it feel like we had major mending from times long ago. But sadly we don't have major mending anymore. So I had to compensate, put 43 into blessed. I think all stamina tunes should do this. Really helps you get the most out of your vigor and your rally. We got 9 physical weapon expert. It's going to up our weave damage, which we're weaving just about everything. And 31 mastered arms. That's going to up our burning light and Dawnbreaker and crescent sweep initial damage. And that's about it. I mean, we don't have a lot of direct damage attacks. But the ones that we do have, they're important for taking down our opponent. Note that this is not buff power of the light. So you're pretty much just using this for burning light procs off your jabs and, you know, crescent sweep and binding javelin. This ups your binding javelin damage, which is actually decent damage for a CC. Ups your Dawnbreaker smiting initial hit, and ups reverse slice and crescent sweep. And let's move on to the ritual. 61 Thaumaturge. We're using several dots in this build, and if we proc our two-handed axe bleed on the back bar, though I do want to make that a maul. Just haven't got a chance to run Asylum again. But it's going to buff our jabs, our rending slashes, pretty much all of our major damage sources. Our Dawnbreaker dot, crescent sweep dot, though it's negligible. And but it's going to buff our bread and butter skill. You got to have this. 28 precise strikes. Our crit's not huge on this build. We set at 38.8% crit when we're buffed up. And so I didn't like to overspec into this skill or into this passive. But it's important when you come to burst your opponent down. Your shit's going to be critting. And it's important for your heals. As long as you get 2 or 3 vigor, at least 2 vigor ticks to crit, you're alright. If you don't get any vigor ticks to crit, you're kind of in a world of shit and you gotta stand there and cast it again and try to line of sight. Because crit heals are phenomenal, and when heals don't crit, they suck ass. It's just the way it is. 31 piercing, like I said, we don't have a major fracture debuff, so we gotta try to get as much penetration as possible from other sources. And this is one great source that we have. There's also a very low, how would I say this? Diminishing returns on this. It's pretty good. Always throw your extra points in here if you can't get a whole percent anywhere else. And we're using 37 mighty to up our overall damage by 9%. Let's move on to the red tree. The steed. We're running 56 ironclad, reduce our direct damage taken by 20%. We're using 3 spell shield, up our spell resistance a little, take advantage of that front end load. We're using 30 resistant, help up our crit resistance. We're in full pen, and I'm comfortable at 2650 crit resistance. I like that number. Serves me well. We're using 51 thick skin under the lady. It's going to reduce our dot damage taken by 19%. And dots are pretty much, in my opinion, what kill you when you're line of sighting. But Trout, you have a purge. Yes, but I'm using that to get rid of snares. Snares 100% kill you. The dots, I try to get rid of them when I got a lot of them on me, but because they're pretty much what kill you when you're line of sighting. I mean, they're on you, and you gotta try to reduce the damage you take from them. I mean, they're not too strong either. It's a damage over time. It's not like the burst, but if you let them build up on you, you're going to die. So 19 thick skin, or 19% from thick skin, 51 points there. We got 37 in hardy, reducing our physical damage taken by 9%. We're running a little more here because we're a Templar. We get a little bit of spell resistance from the Balanced Warrior passive under Aegis Spear. And we're using 32 in Elemental Defender for 8% reduced magical damage, all magic-based abilities, because once again we have that spell resistance from being a Templar. And we're using exactly 120 in this tree for the Unchained passive. When you break free, you want to pretty much hit your most expensive skill, which I think for us is Rally. Or Binding Javelin. It's one of those 2 skills. Or Vigor. And it's going to reduce that cost by 80%. That's a big part of your sustain. Let's move on to the final tree that we have to go over. That's the Lord. We're using 27 quick recovery, increasing our healing recede by 7%. And we're using 4 heavy armor focus to up our physical resistance just a hair. It's better than putting them into hardy or elemental defender, but though these do not get debuffed by enemy's penetration, whereas this star does, but we have pretty strong resistances because we're in heavy armor. And that's going to wrap it up for CP. So now we're going to go into our combat rotation, put down our self buffs like we went over, followed up with a vigor. It's going to let you be protected while you do your damage. Always do the vigor last on your buff rotation, so you can have that up while you're on the offense. It's like a mag sword with their shields. It's your protection while you're, it's your protection while you're shredding. That's what separates the good players and the bad players. Bad players will they'll use that vigor when they think they need it, when they're already at 50-60% health. That's not the way to use vigor. Treat it like a Magicka Sorcerer's Shield. So you're going to bar swap, go right into Rending Slashes, Power of the Light. I like to do a heavy attack weave into Budding Jabs. And then I like to do a light attack, Binding Javelin, light attack, jabs. And then right before the Power of the Light comes down, you follow through with a Dawnbreaker. So I'm going to build up an ultimate and show you the full rotation at full speed. Okay, so let's go ahead into our kill rotation. I like to weave on my two-handed axe bar to try to proc the heavy weapons bleed and to get the disease damage from our glyph onto the target nice and early and hopefully proc Major Defile, as this is our only source of that. That being said, let's do it. You want your Dawnbreaker to hit the target right before Power of the Light does. That puts a very strong burst onto your target that usually kills people outright. And then when it doesn't, you bar swap, you start smashing that reverse slice, which proc the heavy weapons bleed and the fucking Celine's Bear instantly. Thank you guys for watching my Stamina Templar build video, Karl Franz. If this video helps you guys, please shoot me a like or a sub. I appreciate both. If you have any questions about this build video, go ahead and throw them in the comments section below. And I plan on putting out videos for builds about once every week, week and a half. I'm going to go through all 10 specs and then start doing some more niche specs after that. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it.